Hi everyone, Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. In the Fireside Chat series, we're celebrating leaders that combine humanity as well as strategy in building great organizations. Right now, we're very excited to chat with Mirella de Civita, the president of Papillon MDC and the founder of GHI. Mirella, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Well, somewhere that I would really like to start is when we've spoken in the past, you said that you're an individual that's not afraid to go towards the unknown. And as a result, you've had a very interesting journey. Was wondering if you could tell the audience a little bit about that.
Sure. So maybe I should be perfectly honest and say that when I started my journey through school and ended up in the graduate program in psychology, I really felt, and from every part of my body, that I absolutely wanted to be a psychologist, a clinical psychologist at that. And I really didn't give much thought to anything other than being a clinical psychologist. And so I put all of my effort and my energy in that. I completed a PhD. At the time, even as a graduate student, had some success in publishing, because in the academic world, if you don't publish, you perish. And was very fortunate. I met a incredible professor, Dr. Patricia Dobkin, who gave me a wonderful opportunity. And I do believe that we get to where we are today, yes, indeed, because of our competencies. And there's tons of research in relation to our intelligence, which is in and of itself a very interesting topic. But we do have these encounters, and we do get lucky. And I really fundamentally believe I got very lucky to have met Dr. Patricia Dobkin, who encouraged me to apply for a postdoctoral fellowship in medicine, which is what I did. Got a great scholarship, Canadian. It's called the CIHR, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, and pursued a postdoctoral fellowship in medicine under her supervision. Loved it, had a great time. And then something changed as I had come to the end of that time. I just didn't feel anymore the desire that I felt for so many years. I had finally arrived, right? There's this feeling of knowing that you finally arrived. You worked so hard. And anyone that's ever done a postdoc following a PhD, you know how much you've had to give up. And I don't like to use this word often, sacrifice to get there. People move with their lives, they get married, they have children, they start to earn. And as a postdoc, that's not necessarily what's happening. I was fortunate. I was married, and I also had a daughter at the time, and I was still a student. And it just didn't feel right anymore. It didn't feel right. I just didn't know where I wanted to go next. I just knew that staying where I was created so much anxiety, and there was some fear attached to it. So I just knew that wasn't right. I just knew that the fear of staying was greater than the fear of going, and I just had to go. Go to where was the question that I didn't have an answer to. However, as a good academic and using empirically based research, I knew that the first step was to take a look at my competencies, take a look at my skills, and ask myself, where can I use these skills? Where else in this world can I use these skills? And the first thought that came to mind, well, start with a course. Go ahead, take a course. The closest thing to you right now is psychology. So take a course in ethics, because you may want to just start your own private practice. So academia versus private practice, very different. And so that's what happened. I took this course and I learned about management consulting. The thing that we are doing here today, the management consulting world, I had no idea what it was. I had no base upon which to build on. And I just went for it. There was a job opening. They were looking for a psychologist to do psychometric assessments in selection and development, and I took it. Unknown to me at the time was a field out there that really aligned with what was important to me at the time, and that was to start learning again with a sense of curiosity, that level of curiosity that I had lost at the end of my postdoctoral fellowship. And I found it again. So I was so excited to be doing this work. Frankly, I would have done the work for free because I was so excited. And that's how everything changed. And at the time, I say the story, and I still, giggle inside. There were many of my academic friends as well as mentors that felt that I wouldn't stay long in the business world, that I would come back to academia. And I haven't been back. I mean, this was 2006. I'm still here. I think they've given up on the bet. But that was one time where I wasn't afraid at all. I wasn't afraid to leave behind what I had worked so hard to earn. And quite frankly, it wasn't over yet. I mean, I still could have applied for a position in academia, and I may have had a great career. I just knew that that was not going to make me happy. And being happy in life is so important to me.
As I listened between the lines a little bit, it seems like you were on a really deep self-awareness journey. There was something within you that was saying, I want to learn more about who I am. And it almost seems like psychometric assessments, for listeners that may not be familiar with them, when we talk about the term psychometric assessments, we refer to like the Hogan, the Myers-Briggs, the Big Five, all of these sort of self-awareness tools. So is it fair to say maybe at some level you were sort of scratching your own itch and thus helping others get the self-awareness that you were so yearning for?
I could not disagree with you. There was something more that I felt I had yet to learn. And as crazy as this may sound, even as I say it to you and share this with you today, it felt as though at the time there was an end, and I just didn't want whatever that end was to be that. And I wanted something more. And I'm very careful with my words. There was a fear of staying, and that fear was so much greater than to go and to discover potentially what was I really made of. I don't have that answer yet. I just know that as I entered this other world, I began to find comfort with that learner's mind, that curiosity that had really driven me all along. I was raised in a working poor family, and finances was never talked about in my home. We just knew. And yet there was never heaviness. There was always light. There was always fun. There was always pleasure. And my parents inculcated in me hard work. Hard work. It didn't matter that you were smart. That was a given. In fact, you didn't earn it. My dad would often say to me, you didn't earn it. Your grandparents were really smart. And he had, unbeknownst to him, there's a lot of there's a lot of evidence behind that. So that yearning desire to be better, I think I had reached that moment as a scholar that said, I probably will not get any better. And it's crazy to say, because again, you finish a postdoctoral fellowship in medicine, your next big opportunity is to land a position in academia. And that's no small feat. There's so much work still ahead. And yet for me at the time, I just didn't want it. I didn't want it. I wanted something else. And so coming into the world of management, I didn't know, was really interesting. And I guess if clients are listening to this, they would probably chuckle, because I was so fascinated by the person in front of me as I was doing the assessment. And I was so fascinated by what they did in life and what made them so excited about wanting to position themselves for the next position, for instance, of VP of marketing. What was that all about? So it sparked in me that incredible passion that I had lost.
So much richness to unpack there. So on one level, it was as if, you knew, all right, this path doesn't quite make sense. I'm going to take a few steps and explore this other, even though it's totally unknown to me. I don't really get what's going on here path. I'm curious if you could tell us just a little bit more about how you knew, number one, that something about this doesn't quite feel right and something about this does. Was it just a simple matter of feeling, like going within and listening to the signals that you were getting, or was there some other element to your decision?
So I think my answer, I'm hoping it won't be as complicated as it's showing up right now in my mind. The feeling of knowing that where I was no longer aligned with who I felt at the time I wanted to be started very slowly, right? It's a kind of like it's like an amber, and then the more you pay attention to it, the louder it gets. And then as it gets louder, you can't silence it anymore. So you have a choice. You can either pretend and deny and keep going, and chances are you may, in fact, get that career, in my case, get that position, but it's going to seep through, right? It's going to seep through in how I would prepare for my lectures. It's going to seep through in how I present myself in front of, future leaders and trying to teach them. It may also seep through in how hard it would be for me to churn papers around. So, but it's still a choice, and people can make that choice. Or you're not afraid of that voice that's getting louder and louder and louder and asking you to pay attention. And then what comes next is scary, because it means that you need to almost at the same time grieve what you've done to get you there. And that's really scary. And so that feeling then feels a lot more like that yicky feeling that starts in the pit of your stomach and then somehow finds its way to your throat. And so when someone says to you, so, what position are you looking to apply to? You say, but there's quivering in you. Then you know something is off, right? It's off. And I wasn't, and I thank my parents for this. I wasn't raised to pretend. My parents didn't raise a child that pretends. And they raised a child that isn't afraid to see what is true and to face it. Just face it. And so there was nothing, I would be lying if I said to you that, going in for that interview at the time, it was Knightsbridge. It was a pan-Canadian company, no small company, to say the least. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't sit there through the interview with tremendous fear. I pushed through it because there was something I needed to learn about myself. And what I learned was, oh, I can do this. I did this interview, went well. Probably going to feel as much fear in my first day at work. And yes, I did. And then something else happens. I'll never forget my first day, right? And so as academic scholars, especially you're doing your postdoc, you don't get big office, right? You're sharing an office with other students, and sometimes you're sharing them with postdoctoral fellows. And so here I am, they're showing me my office. It was pretty big. And I turned around and I said to my friend who unfortunately passed away, I said, France, I said, is this for me? She says, yes. I said, who am I sharing my office with? She says, you're sharing it with no one. All for me? Why so much space? I don't need so much space to do my work. And that has stayed with me, right? Even in my company, I don't walk around pretending that I need the biggest office. I'm always wondering. In fact, we don't subscribe to that way of thinking, right? But I use that image because even as I stood in that office and asked the question, of course there was fear, right? There was fear. Will this be the place where I will continue to discover who I am? Or will the fear show up again? And it did show up again, except that the second time it showed up, I kind of knew what to do with it. The first time, I'll say it over and over again, I got lucky. I was in the right time, the right place, met the right person. Knightsbridge had an opening. Coincidence? Maybe.
I love it. I think it's so interesting how this ability to not hide the truth, to feel into your body, to honor that ember that started to burn more brightly, almost gave you this energy with which to transcend the fear that comes up. And I think all of us have those moments in our life, in our career, but in our life more broadly, when we have to make that choice. And I love that visual of that ember powering your way through scary moments.
Yeah.
Something that I would love to dive into next is, so after Nicebridge, you kicked off a brilliant entrepreneurial career. I would love to learn a little bit more about your companies and what it's like to be this founder.
Right. Yes, indeed. So, what I then learned, and I probably would not have learned this had I stayed in academia, was that I had this strong entrepreneurial bent to me. And to be an entrepreneur has nothing to do with, accumulate your wealth and then spin it off in a company. In fact, that wouldn't be my definition of an entrepreneur. My definition is you've got a great idea, no one's paying attention to you, do it, put it out there. And so that's what I did. I had a very good idea. It just wasn't the right place to manifest it. And I just did it. I just, the first, Papillon MDC, the name of it didn't even come to me until a few weeks later. The thing that came to me, which is what gave me the energy to move, was the tagline, transform and take flight. So, the second time that the fear appeared, right, here I am. I'm actually, at the time, I was in charge of the entire Canadian coaching practice. And, you look back, and I was 3 years into the company. I'm doing what I love. I love coaching. This is what I do today. Why would I leave? And again, the small voice appears again and says, I'm not sure if this is where you need to stay. And so I launched out, and believe me when I say this, I didn't launch out with millions in my pocket to start a company. I launched out potentially as poor as when I started as a postdoc heading into the business world. But I did it. I had a tagline. I put it out there. Company name followed. And I just did what I knew I do best. I'm strong at prioritization. I have high levels of conscientiousness. And I do know those are the two things that you need to get going on anything, even insofar as doing your bed in the morning. So I did that. And then 6 months later, Jenny Gendron, who used to be my EA also at Nicebridge, joined me. And I cut my salary in half to make space for her. And I'll cut my salary in half and do what I have to do to bring on people. And that's how I see it. So for me, the entrepreneurial element is you do it because you've got an idea, you believe in that idea more so than anyone else. And every time someone tells you it's a bad idea, you've got this big grin on your face because now you know for sure it's a great idea. And so every time I heard, don't do it, you've got a great career, I knew then, okay, I have to. This is it, right? And it's been really the thing that I know when I'm onto something. When someone tells me, oh, it's too confusing, no one will understand. That's why I'm going to do it. And so Papillon MDC is your traditional management consulting firm where the team is absolutely amazing. They are a diverse group of professionals. There's not one professional that's the same. Obviously, those that are trained professional coaches respect, understand the coaching practice, but they show up as different as the three of us here are coaches, but we're all very different. The thing about Papillon MDC that is really at the core is our social giving efforts. Company started in 2010. By 2012, I said, enough. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait until, the company has sufficient profits to be able to give back to society. That's not how I was raised at all. We were poor. My dad and I, my brother at the time, we would walk the streets of Montreal. And, as poor as we were, my dad always found something to give, always. And he said to me, when you have, you give, because when you don't have, you wish someone gives. And so that's been with me. And so we started the Take Flight initiative, where we would invite nonprofit organizations around the world to write in, tell us how we can help them, tell us why they need our help, and we would decide who we would partner with, and we would do all the leadership work that we did for companies for free. And we did that for many years.
Mm.
And the last few years, we've decided to truly focus in one very small community in Africa. And we partner with our partners, Humalia. And that's where our focus has been. So that's also very, very important to Papillon MDC. Clients may or may not know this, but whenever they work with us, there is funds that are earmarked to help us do this work for nonprofit organizations that just can't afford this level of expertise. And we do it.
So I have to say, done quite a few interviews on this show. I've never been moved to tears before, and you have absolutely moved me to that place now twice in this conversation. When you talk about that office that was so big, when you talked about the entrepreneurial journey of explaining an idea that deep down is wonderful and that's confusing, I couldn't help but be brought to tears. And I just want to honor the warmth and the genuineness with which you show up at every moment. If this is how you show up here, I have little doubt you show up this way in so many other moments. And I'm just absolutely blessed to be speaking to you today. There is such a warmth that you convey. It's absolutely mesmerizing. And I just appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's very, very moving for me. Very moving.
Mm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, you're so energized by giving back. You have such warmth to provide to the nonprofit world. Curious to learn a little bit more about, when you talk about the idea that's so amazing at the heart of Papillon, the business idea. Can you tell us a little bit more? So coaching and consulting are part of the picture, it sounds like, but can you flesh out a little bit more for us about the contribution that the business makes on the for-profit side?
Right. So there are ways in which we obviously aim, and our intent is to help people learn how to come back to themselves. And we don't go out there and pronounce to the world, this is the intent, to bring you back to who you are so that you can discover who you can be. So we do that through empirically based approaches. And so all of our leadership development programs that can in fact endure for a couple of months has at the very core this element of gentle, it's almost like a gentle nudge through the learning of the content, that you are so unique, you are so important to this, and only you can make this decision. Even if your company has purchased a leadership development program, and even if your manager has said to you, this is important, it's part of the development that will bring you to the next position, all of that is important to you. And it isn't as important to us. What's really important to us is how you show up in these programs, the choices you make, and the accountability you take. Because we're gone, right? We're gone. After having done what we have come to do, we know that your life is in your hands. And so if we spend a couple of months with you, our hope is that we are able to transfer this message. And we do that through the teachings of the different elements of leadership. That's through our leadership program. So it's very seeped in the psychology of mindfulness and the psychology of developmental potential. And I would be lying if I said that I didn't take my own clinical awareness of developmental psychopathology, risk and resilience, and I didn't seep it through. And what's really interesting here, Dan, is once you do that, those that join your company, so for instance, today I've got a VP of leadership and innovation, Stefano. He's building his own programs, and he may be doing it intentionally or maybe not, but it's seeped into this method of reaching people, right? And so it's part of the culture in how you show up, even insofar as having conversations with your people. And so all of that matters. And, a couple of years ago, as the three of us know, maybe 3 years ago, we saw everywhere, right? On LinkedIn, people were showing up saying that they're teaching mindfulness after having attended 2 or 3 days of training.
Yeah.
And, we've been doing this kind of work since 2010, but we've never, ever gone to the market with it. Because for me, it's next to holy. I know this is a big word. It's next to that.
Yeah.
And if it's that important, you don't need to say it. You just need to prepare the platform for people to experience it. Right? So that has been very important. In our executive coaching, executives will come to us or human resource professionals will contact us for the same reasons that most coaches get contacted. We have someone, they're interested in their development and so forth. And what's interesting in that area of service is that it's a triangle. So it's a triad relationship. As much as the person in front of me in that moment is the most important person, I must and always do keep in mind the corporation that is the partner that will be with them for as long as they desire to hold that position. So I'm very mindful of that. And the last thing I want is to create dependency. I mean, for those who've been coached by me, they know that I'm gone. They can obviously reach out to me, a few months later to say, hey, here's what's showing up. But those calls are very brief, 10, 15 minutes. And again, I do this because I'm a strong believer of responsibility and accountability. And if you didn't put your full self during the time we were together, something I choose not to judge, then it might be harder for you to employ some of the skills that you learned while we were together. And I'm saddened by that, but I certainly won't feel compelled to stick around and to hold your hand to do that, because I think that's wrong. I really do think that's wrong. I think as coaches, we need to honor that we only travel with people for a very short period of time. And we need to have the belief that they can and will find their way forward. And lucky are those that find their way while you're with them. But you and I, and Lisa, we also know that there's some magic that happens between sessions, and a lot of magic happens after we're done. So some of the learnings may not have had that moment, but they do find their moment later on. And so I prefer to believe in that. And so I don't stick around.
Again, so much richness to unpack, but it sounds as if, at the core of your work, whether it's leadership development, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's executive coaching, you are so careful, it feels, to enable others' humanity. That's sort of the absolute core of it, right? It's like you have an opportunity to become who you're meant to become. The opportunity is there. I'm going to give you just enough of a nudge to seize it, to become more mindful, to step up to the next rung on the ladder. And I want to be so careful and circumspect about how I do it, because then I won't be enabling your humanity if I go a little too far. It's like this careful dance for you. It sounds so beautiful the way you describe it.
Yeah. It's the word dance is what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, and it is exactly that. It's a careful dance.
Yeah. It's wonderful to think of it that way. So having done this tremendous work, both on sort of the for-profit and the nonprofit side, I'm curious, what's next as you think about sort of 2021? We have still a newish year.
Newish.
What do you want to do next? Do you want to grow your business? Do you want to do more nonprofit stuff? What's exciting you? What's the next thing for you, Mirella?
So the next thing is for me to turn a lot more of my attention toward GHI, so Grand Heron International. So that is the second company I founded 5 years ago. And again, another idea came to mind that I knew did not fit within Papillon MDC. And even then, 5 years ago, people couldn't understand what on earth was I talking about. And I just went for it again and said, it's going to, I tapped into a need 5 years ago that was very difficult for people to recognize that indeed they have this need. And it was complicated at the same time as exciting, because this time it meant, how on earth am I going to do this? How on earth am I going to start a second company and manage a second company and grow a second company where 5 years ago Papillon MDC was not where it is today? And I don't regret those 5 years. I call it my 5 year startup. I seriously call it my 5 year startup. And most people that don't recognize and understand entrepreneurship, which is going back to the definition that I gave out, will have that silly comment of, oh, it's 5 years already, and how come you're not here, right? And what they fail to recognize is that there is such a thing as a 5 year startup. And I wouldn't do it any other way. I actually feel so lucky to say that today, when I look there, I know now who I can be there. And that is exactly what GHI needs now. So for me, the next area of attention is to truly give as much love, as much nurturing as I did Papillon MDC to GHI, because the need that I want to have out there in the world recognized is the following. Wouldn't it be great if we all had a council of coaches, where at any point in time, you are stuck and your mind is swirling with ideas and you're not quite sure which one to go with, that you can go to someone that is non-judgmental, someone who is going to just sit with you, even if it's just for 1 hour, and help you through it. So that is what GHI is all about, right? It's allowing people anywhere, anytime, to move past this hierarchy that executive coaching is only for the elite and it's only for top. I want to do away with that somehow. There will always be a need for executive coaches at that level, and it's right. And there will always be a need for developmental coaching, and it's right. And I also believe that there should always be a need to speak to a coach when you need to speak to one. And I think that's right. And so that's where I'm aiming my efforts, and my attention is bringing GHI to the world so that people anywhere, anytime know that they have a right to a coach. And it's affordable, it's possible, and it can happen.
I love that GHI moves coaching from just this elite, tiny, tiny portion of the population and gives it
Yes.
to others. And on top of that, I love the idea of a council of coaches, depending on kind of what your needs are in the moment. Do you have an ideal type of customer in mind? Like who's the type of human that you think GHI is best for?
Oh, what a beautiful question. So again, in keeping with the truth of how I conceive it in my mind, tough for me to see that one individual or that group of individual. When we democratize anything, it's almost as if we're saying, you belong, you belong, you belong. Did you know you belong? Did you know that it's there for you too? And so that's what I see in my mind's eye. I see it's for you, you. Oh, yes. And it's also for you. So the student who's 19, and it's such a scary moment right now, since 2006, I still hold clinical practice every Friday. And it's just so, it just moves me knowing that in the last year, because of COVID, the number of people of that age group truly, truly confused and scared of what the future holds for them. Well, imagine being a 19-year-old and not quite sure what is the next thing you ought to be doing. Where do you go? You can go to your counselor as far as the courses and the pathways concerned, but there's something deeper there. So that's for you. You're a 24-year-old and you just got your first job, and for some reason your manager is just not talking to you in a way that motivates you and brings the best in you. Why shouldn't you stand tall and share? It's not fair to your manager. They have no clue what motivates you. Well, speak to a coach and find a way. You're a 35-year-old and you happen to be a woman, and it's so complicated being a woman in that age bracket, because now you know that you've got to get everything right. You got to get your career. If you want a family, if that's what you want, you got to get that right too. And now all of a sudden you've got that big promotion that's going to take you away from the other thing you really want. What do you go to? It's for you. You're a 55-year-old and your company tells you, you could retire. You could if you want. You've got your stock options, you've got this, you've got that. But you don't know what you're going to do once you retire. Who do you go to? So I feel, that it is, in fact, for everyone. As long as you can identify that you're stuck and you are damn tired being stuck, just tired emotionally, cognitively, then you need to do something about it. Because then it festers and it brings up so much other stuff. It just brings up the part of us that we all know is possible that we don't want to admit, resentfulness, regret, jealousy, and anger, and anxiety, and all of that. So you got to do something.
Oh man, that is really beautiful. I think that the way that you just described it, you're right. All of us have these moments. All of us have these moments that we need help. We're so accustomed to just sucking it up or thinking that that's normal to just feel stuck, to feel anxious. And I love that your vision, as you said, democratizes, makes it available and acceptable and encourages us to get help.
And you can't do that. It's one thing, again, I go back to the fundamental principle of being an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, I reserve the right to have my definition, nothing empirical about it other than a level of agreeableness is lower, level of commitment is higher, level of kind of no fear is higher, all of that stuff. But my definition is, if you're going to do something and you've got that idea and you know what it's for, you can't just do something, you've got the idea, you know what it's for, and then find yourself stuck because you want it to be profitable at the same time. That isn't my conception of entrepreneurship. For me, even at Papillon MDC, we never talk about, aiming for a specific number of sales. That's secondary. That's going to happen once we get the real thing right. Once we figure out what is it that we are here to do and how we are going to live that mission, get that right. Everything else will come later. Because otherwise you drive people to their lowest denominator once you put out that target, right? And then you're surprised why people are not cooperating, why they're not aligning, why they are, keeping information to themselves. So you actually drive them to their lowest denominator when you put out silly things like that. So going back to GHI, it's one thing to say democratization, it's one thing to say for you. Well, a 19-year-old doesn't have $500 for crying out loud to come to the service. The 35-year-old that is not quite sure doesn't have $250 to spend. So even our price point matches exactly the importance of what we do, because it has to be affordable. Otherwise, why do it? Why do it?
Well, it sounds like the importance of clarity is high on your agenda, right? Because clarity motivates both the people working on creating that vision as well as the people that we ultimately serve. How can we serve and enable others to develop clarity if we don't have it ourselves, right?
Correct.
So I think I love the way that you think about all of that. And listen, Mirella, I think we could continue speaking for a very long time. This is such a fascinating conversation. To come full circle today, we've talked about so many serious and tricky subjects, finding our way in the world, our sense of identity and work. I'm curious to sort of end on a lighter note. What's fun for you when you're not growing your two companies, when you're not doing, the work that you're meant to do in the world? What do you do for fun?
And I will confess to say that for me, fun is reading.
Mm,
I really feel happy when I'm reading. I really feel happy when I'm thinking of something new and I'm writing. So writing and reading are the two things that I find are fun. Now, in the traditional definition of fun, where there's a lot more physical activity, then the second thing that I could say is fun is having time with my two German shepherds, who
mhm.
obviously will get me up and go out into the bloody cold. So that's fun. And I guess the last thing is, and then that's probably the first most important thing. So if I can't be with my family, and I can't be with my husband and my daughter because they're busy doing other stuff, then I will move to the first thing I said, which is reading and writing. And if that can't happen, then I'll move to the third, which is okay, Dante and Zena, let's go out and play. So that's pretty much how I spend my time. And I believe that in my life, that order is very critical.
Mm, mm. Love it. Love it. Thank you so, so much. What a just enriching conversation. So much for our listeners to learn, and uh, the emotional experience of this conversation beyond the content, I think, was so, so enriching. So appreciate you, and just a tremendous pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you. It was so much, it went so fast. And I feel like we are in the same room. So definitely the connection was really incredible, was really strong. And I want to thank you both for inviting me here today. Thank you.